Good morning and welcome to Dan Lonowski, legislative candidate from District 33. Thank you, Dan, for joining us for our virtual legislative candidate meetings. My name is Gina Ragland, and joining me today is Susan DeCamp, volunteer state president, and advocacy lead volunteers Joyce Beck, Bob Lassen, and Mike Barwig. Jan Barneson, an AARP volunteer and LD 33 constituent, is also joining us this morning. Dan, we appreciate your time and to meet with us and discuss issues of importance for the 50-plus voter and their families in Nebraska. As a reminder, again, this meeting is being recorded with the intent we'll share with our AARP members across your district prior to the election. With that, Dan, if you want to start us off by giving us a little background about yourself and your campaign in 5 minutes or less, would be great. And once we've completed your opening, we'll move into the questions. So go ahead, Dan.
Great. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you all. So I've been a member of the National Guard for the last 36 years, or for 36 years. I retired in 2016, and I did some Army time in there and some active duty time overseas in a few places and a few deployments, Afghanistan, DMZ in Korea. Actually, the Berlin Wall, I was on guard there way back in 1985 when I kicked off my career. So I've had some good experiences in the military, and even the bad situations were good experiences in my mind. So I have a wife and 5 children. They're now all grown, and my baby is 22, and she'll get married in December. So I'll have them all married off, and have 9 grandchildren. So I'm very blessed in all those categories. I was also a teacher for 35 years. For the first 5, I was in Fairbury, Nebraska. And after that, we just moved closer to my wife's parents. So we lived down in Blue Hill, but I taught in Adams Central for the last 29 years, retired just a little over a year ago. As soon as I retired, I went to work for an anti-drug agency. It's called ASAP, Area Substance and Alcohol Abuse Prevention. So over the last year, I'd been returning to schools and lecturing on the dangers of fentanyl and alcohol and vaping, smoking, smokeless tobacco. And mostly I hit on vaping because that's already like down into our 4th and 5th graders. And it's kind of amazing how many of them have been told that it's not really harmful for you, or they've heard adults say that. And so I've got some real good ideas on how we can curb the vaping, at least with our under 18 ages. I've seen what some other states have done, and I have some good ideas there that I've noticed no one in the unicameral has attempted yet. So otherwise, I was in high school, or as a high school teacher, I was a head wrestling coach and assistant football all those years, junior high football for all those years, and really just made a lot of great connections with a lot of kids and a lot of parents, and not only through the sports, but as a high school Spanish teacher as well. So in a nutshell, I guess that's where I come from, and I'm ready for you guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan, for your background. Congratulations on your 5 kids and your 9 wonderful grandchildren. There's nothing better than that. So thanks for sharing that personal side of your life with us. We appreciate it. As I said before, we've provided you with a set of 3 questions pertaining to the 50-plus in Nebraska. And again, these are issues that have come to our attention that we hear from our membership of what's important, again, for that 50-plus across the state. We have allotted around 5 minutes for each question, just so we can kind of move through the process quickly. We are going to begin with question 1, which is health, caregiving, and home and community-based care. And Joyce Beck is going to take that. So go ahead, Joyce.
Good morning, Dan. I know our paths have crossed numerous times, and I'm glad that they are crossing one more time.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. So 84% of Nebraskans over 45 say that staying in their home as they get older is extremely important to them. Home and community-based services, as well as area agencies on aging, become important assets to caregivers as they care for loved ones. Home care not only meets the needs of their loved ones, but it also provides release for an already strained long-term care industry. So here's my questions for you, Dan. What would you do to protect and or expand the home and community-based programs, particularly recruiting and retention of sufficient workforce and adequate funding for programs and services that older Nebraskans and their families rely on? And then my second question is, what would you do to support the 179,000 unpaid family caregivers in Nebraska?
Wow, Joyce, loaded questions there. Obviously, if we had the tax base, we could solve everything. So first of all, we've got to make sure that we make senior living facilities affordable, because a lot of people just can't afford that, and for whatever reason, the facilities can't afford to stay open. So we're quickly losing that. And it would be nice to go back to 1950 when families took care of their elderly parents and whatever. And I know of some that still do, but just because of the changing dynamics in our society, that's not possible. So we somehow have got to make those senior living facilities both affordable and attractive for our seniors. And one thought I've had is, once people have paid off their home in Nebraska, it would certainly be great if their property taxes went away. I know of people that have paid their home off and their property taxes are now higher than what they paid for the home 40 years ago or even 30 years ago. And so we're the fourth highest in the nation with property taxes. We've got to figure that out, especially for our elderly people. And I don't say that just because I've become one of the elderly, but I'm at least blessed enough I can afford, to make these payments and pay things off. But man, we've got to take care of all these people that have paved the road for us, so to speak, which is my perfect segue for toll roads in Nebraska. I do not know why we do not have toll booths at the end of our interstate on both ends. We have excess of 15,000 cars a day on a normal day that just pass through our state. And they probably buy a meal and they probably pay for gas once or twice. But they're using our roads. And so they're, wearing them down and what have you. And it really doesn't cost them a dime. So if at the end of I-80 on each end, if we had $1 per vehicle and 15,000 on a normal day, 30,000 on a Thanksgiving weekend of people passing in and out, I can't imagine people would really complain about $1, but can you imagine $15,000 to $30,000 of the vehicles that just pass through per day, what that would do? And I hear a lot of people say, well, they'll just go around. And I'm like, really? Somebody would drive extra miles to to avoid paying $1? So for me, that's one way we could certainly pay off a lot of our property tax issues, or at least make it more equitable. So I have some ideas. I have some plans there. I mean, the other plan was to build an attraction right in the middle of the state, but I don't think that's going to happen. So for now, I'll stick with my toll road idea. I don't know if that helps at all, Joyce, but appreciate those questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Moving on to question 2, it addresses consumer fraud, exploitation, and protections, and Mike Barwig's going to take that. So go ahead, Mike.
Morning, Dan.
Morning, Mike.
I don't know if you remember me, but my son Jeff wrestled under your coaching. He and Dana Weens. So they both said hello.
Yeah. So I've had both Jeff, and then I had Wade Barneson in wrestling. So I'm really some of my favorite kids. But yeah, Jeff and I still stay in contact. In fact, Wade and I still stay in contact because he's a member of the National Guard, and it's kind of neat because I see those kids as they were like I was in high school, ornery and hard to train and hard to rein in, and then they grow up and they learn some skills and become pretty valuable assets to our society. But Mike, I do remember all your kids well. So
all right, thanks. Anyway, Scammers are increasingly targeting older adults with scams such as wire transfers, gift card scams, and schemes involving real property. Nationwide, the average victim of elder fraud lost nearly $34,000 due to these crimes in 2023. And in Nebraska, the FTC showed that there were 4,643 fraud reports made. Nearly 9 in 10 consumers agree that lawmakers need to do more to protect consumers from fraud and scams. With that in mind, our question for you is, consumers lose billions of dollars each year to online financial, property, and other types of fraud. What will you do to address and ensure that Nebraskans are protected against fraud and deceptive or unfair business practices and provide opportunities for redress to these victims? Would you support enacting laws to require merchants that sell gift cards to post notices, enactment of a consumer fraud restitution fund, implementation of preventative or corrective measures to assist in combating owner-seller housing impersonation fraud?
Oh, great question, Mike. When I see elderly people get taken like this, I think of little kids who eat candy and they don't know they're going to get an upset tummy, so they just keep eating until it's too late. Now it's on the opposite end, as adults, and we're online, and certainly we have been for a while, but I don't know, people see these different ideas, and if it's too good to be true, it probably is. But just a side note, when I retired from teaching, they gave me a $1,500 gift certificate or a card, a gift card. And so I didn't use it for a while. And I don't know, couple months after we retired, my wife's like, we should start using this. So we went to use it and it had been spent. In fact, we called Twi left from the high school and said, who did you get this through? Where do we go? And she felt terrible. And it wasn't her fault, but we went to look and it was spent in Amarillo, Texas, the day after it had been issued. So it was never good to me. And so we were just out that card. The entire staff that had donated to it was out that money. But the company said, we're sorry, we cannot track that. So a couple things, Mike. First of all, everyone says, well, if you get LifeLock, this won't happen to you. So my thought is, why isn't our bank and why aren't the credit companies already using LifeLock? That should be something that they install or they have to protect the rights of their constituents or of their clients, I guess. So the bank I have does really well. They called me and said, hey, there was just $70 on your card in Lawrence, Kansas. And I said, yeah, that's me. I'm passing through, but thank you for the call. Mm-hmm. But there's sometimes too, then it sends those alerts. And I think the biggest way we can help senior citizens is to continue to communicate with them and say, look, here's how you can get scammed. Here's what you need to do to help avoid it as much as possible. When you hear these horror stories of people who lose their homes because someone has sold their identity and such, I'm just like, it's incredulous to me that how can this be happening? But we just, the communication and the alerts to them have got to be, paramount. How can the legislature help? I guess I'm at a loss to really tell you, Mike, but there's got to be some ways we can protect people. And I will certainly be interested in studying this issue and trying to figure out what we can do to help people.
And just so you know, Dan, AARP does a lot to educate older adults. Of course, most of those people are our members, AARP members. Yes. And we also have a fraud and scam division where we go out and teach the public to try to prevent this from happening.
Okay, yeah. You still got to get those clients to read it, right?
Well, yeah, or attend seminars.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Mike, for that conversation. Dan, our last question today is on helping people stay in their homes and communities, and Bob Lassen's going to take that. So go ahead, Bob.
Hi, okay, thanks for getting on today, Dan. My questions actually are two-phased. First of all, our goal as an organization is to allow people to stay in their home and ages in place as much as possible. There are some zoning obstacles that don't allow that we'd like to address. And the last thing probably as a main topic is the property tax and what it does. So the questions are, Nebraskans over 65 are the fastest growing segment of our population, and research shows that most want to remain in their homes and communities as they age. As housing costs continue to increase, older adults are unable to find housing to meet their needs, and when seeking downsizing, and thus this pushes them out of the communities and homes that they've lived in for generations. What will you do to support, incentivize, and ensure the creation of affordable and diverse housing options, such as accessory dwelling units, integrational housing, manufactured housing, and townhomes that now may be prohibited by zoning? And second part is, will you fight to ensure that the homestead exemption program is maintained, protected, and to ensure that older Americans who qualify will have access to this tax relief program? Thanks.
Okay. First of all, Bob, if I forget to answer any part of that, make sure at the end that you remind me that I didn't answer. So I was just knocking doors in Minden last week, and they have this one section of town has all these beautiful duplexes, and it's all elderly people or maybe special needs people who can live on their own, but can't afford a house or whatever. And it was just like the most beautiful little community. One gentleman, he offered me to come in for coffee, but I was moving pretty quick, so I didn't take him up on it. This sweet little gal, and I shouldn't say that because she's probably not very much older than me, but she was showing me her flowers outside, and I said, "Well, what's that flower called?" She's telling me, "Well, that's celosia or something like that." And so I wrote it down when I got back to my vehicle because I want to invest in that flower. And so if we can do more things like that, more townhouses, more senior citizen condos and such. And I asked the one gentleman, I said, "Is there a need for more of this housing in Minden?" And he said, "Yes, but the group that built them plans to build more." And he said, "Who is that?" And he said, "I don't know. It's some millionaire from Lincoln." And so if we can get our communities to invest in that, and I touched on this at the beginning, taking care of our elderly, some of those people like Vietnam vets and even older, that just speaks volumes to how well we will build our communities, I think. And so the Homestead Act, of course, I will fight for those rights for people. Yeah, everything is situation dependent, of course, but I also believe that zoning laws have got to stay at the lowest level possible. Now, one issue that's happening in small communities is these people that want to build, and I'm thinking more of farmers and ranchers here, but they meet all the zoning criteria, and then the zoning and planning board still wave their wand and say, "We don't want you to build that 200 chicken ranch here because it's still too close to town," even though they meet all the criteria. And so somehow we've got to just make sure that the zoning commissions know that their job is to, just okay the way, or allow people to build or whatever if they meet all those criteria. So was there something else in there, Bob?
No, I think you did a real good job.
Okay.
The only thing that I might want to talk about a little bit more is the accessory dwelling units. And that's actually just you'd have a primary home where the person maybe has lived forever. And then if we had the zoning that allowed that, you'd be able to put like a mother-in-law's house behind that on the same property. And then again, we keep the person in the same area. But that right now is probably in zoning is a problem. But something like that, I think, would be a real boon.
That's an interesting take. But that would be pretty neat if we could do that, right?
Mhm.
So people want to take care of their grandma or their mother or father, and yet still give them the independent living where they could be. Right now, I guess I'd have to look at those zoning laws and see what exactly holds it up, or what's the purpose of, restricting such access.
Mhm. Well, it's a way to keep them in that same neighborhood, and at the same time, maybe they move out of the big house, or the individual moves out of the big house, and that frees that up for somebody else too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Dan, and thank you, Bob, for the question. Dan, as we're coming now to the end of our meeting, we would like to give back to you a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes again, to talk about some of your personal priorities for serving in the legislature, or if there's specific issues you plan to work on or address, and especially if there's ways that we can be helpful for you. So I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Okay. Well, Mike and Jan, first of all, before I forget, say hello to your children that I taught. I never really saw it as a job because I enjoyed doing it every day. And so kids, it's kind of interesting because kids come back now and they'll remember things that I told them, like, I've never had a bad day, just a bad moment. And now kids say, I kind of use that. And it's true. And I'm saying, good. Had a young man that is now a teacher, and he's not he's probably 40 now, but he has kids doing push-ups in his classroom instead of giving them attention. He's way to burn. That's neat that some of my kids remember those things. My son is a teacher, he's a third grade teacher down in Blue Hill, and all his little kids can recite the pledge already, and they know how to sing the Star Spangled Banner. But there'll be days where they say, how come you haven't given me push-ups lately? And so, just the small things like that come back, they're just little blessings to me. Probably one thing I think that might speak of my past is I've had over 70 of my students that I know of that that I might have talked to about joining the military, about that have joined. Mostly probably Army National Guard, but some Navy and some different kids. I had a young lady, and before the state made it a requirement to say the pledge, we were saying the pledge in my class. And I had a young lady that never stood up for it. So I never made her stand up. I never said anything. But finally, after a couple of weeks, I said, hey, can you stay back for a minute after class? And I asked her, I said, do you mind telling me why you don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And she said, I don't believe in part of it. And I said, can I ask you which part? And she said, the under God. And I said, okay. I said, I understand. I said, you don't have to stand if you don't want to, but if you ever want to talk about it, then I would talk to you. So she still sat, and all of a sudden she started standing. And then she came in on a Friday afternoon after school, and she said, I want to join the Army. I said, you do? And she said, yeah. She said, there's a lot of things there. And her aunt was Muslim, and that's why she didn't stand for God. She said, but she believes in God, but she doesn't want to hurt her aunt's feelings. So we had a long conversation. I said, here's what I can tell you. When you're in the Army, they're not going to ask you why you're not standing. They're going to ride you into the dirt until you follow the rules. And that's just the way it is. And so we talked about it a little bit. 6 months after she graduated, she came back to my classroom in uniform and thanked me. And so she said she still had different beliefs and she wasn't sure. And I said, that's okay. I said, it might come to maybe you never will. I said, I hope you do. I said, because I believe that God's given me a lot of miracles and blessed me a lot. I said, but it's really up to you. So just moments like that, there's well, I won't tell a Wade Barneson story here because, but there's just different things. And like Mike's son, Jeff, and I, we differ politically, but we're still pretty good friends. And we talk through Facebook quite a bit. And I'm a conservative Christian guy, and I always will be, but I also believe that people have the right to their beliefs. And I think that's what makes America great, and especially Nebraska. We don't seem to get into riots and difference and fighting just because we have different beliefs. And it's really what makes us great. And so I guess by taking the anti-drug job, I got to get back into the classroom and talk to kids a little bit. But it is different because I'm not building those relationships. And so, I guess as I go to the legislature, as a conservative, I don't want to defeat my opponents on a bill. I want to get them to come to my side on it. And most issues are not going to be conservative versus liberal. They're going to be, this is good for Nebraska or it's not good for Nebraska. This is good for our senior citizens or it's not good for our senior citizens. This is good for our youth or it's not good for. So most issues, they're going to be, how can we save property taxes? How can we help people stay in the state? How can we attract more teachers or more dentists to the state and things like that? So I'm looking forward to this. And I also know there's going to be some bad moments and some hard moments, but I'll just try to make sure that every day is a good day.
Well, thank you so much again, Dan, for taking the time to visit with us. We wish you the best with your campaign. And again, thank you for meeting with AARP today. Take
All right.
care.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank
Y'all
you.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dan.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks for not sharing about Wade.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was cute.
My son went into the military because of Dan.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And he's got his 20 years in.
Wow.
Hard to imagine that much time has gone by.
Yeah.